Well, folks, thank you for logging in today. This is Bill Costanzo, Livestock Guardian Dog Program Specialist at the AgriLife Center here in San Angelo. We will be doing our Livestock Guardian Dog Q&A session. This is number 33. Thank you all for logging in today and for commenting about the sound, which has been a technical issue, I think, for about the last 4 months at least. We do have several questions today, and some of the answers are fairly long, so I want to go ahead and get started. Will say if you have any questions or follow-up questions to the producer posted stuff, feel free to put those in the chat, and I will try to get to those before we log off today. I do want to thank our sponsor, Spot On Fence, and the Sheep and Goat Predator Management Board. Without the Predator Board, the funding for this program would not be possible. And so if you're in Texas and in the checkoff region, we continue to appreciate your support of the program. So our first question is from Christy League. She wanted to know what flea and tick medication was our dog on that got the flea and tick disease. Was it Ehrlichiosis? Did the dog survive? And was the medication not effective, or was there a missed dosage? So first, Christy, I'm not quite sure because you didn't mention the dog's name. We've had quite a few of our dogs get Ehrlichiosis. That is the tick disease that we talk about fairly frequently on the channel and in our videos and blogs and workshops and things like that I give. All of our dogs, we've been using Bravecto for over 5 years, I guess probably over 6 years at this point that I know of. We also give the puppies NexGard medication until they're about 6 months old, and then we switch over to the Bravecto product. The biggest issue with Bravecto is that while they promote that it's a 3-month product, and it is for most of the ticks that are out there, except for the Lone Star tick. And so we happen to have the Lone Star tick at several of our research ranches. And so we just, assume that, hey, the vet says it's a 3-month product, the box says that it's a 3-month product, and that it would cover the dogs for everything for 3 months. However, when you get into the actual little product insert that's in the box that nobody ever reads, and we're just as guilty of that, the fine print says that Bravecto is only good for 2 months with the Lone Star tick. Now, why that's the case, I don't know, but that's just, it's something with that tick species and how the product kills them. And so that was how, I'm assuming it's Johnny that you're referring to in the post. He was the most recent dog that we lost from Ehrlichiosis complications, and so we didn't miss any treatments on him because we were following the 3-month sequence. However, technically it did get missed because when the Lone Star tick bit him with Ehrlichiosis, he contracted the disease. And so a little bit of background for everybody. I went on to the Merck manual and pulled up some extra information just to kind of go into a little bit more detail of an answer for y'all. But basically, Ehrlichiosis comes from Ehrlichia canis, which is a rickettsia type of organism. And there's other types of it out there. It's very similar to anaplasmosis in cattle. And while there is a vaccine for cattle for anaplasmosis, there is not a vaccine for Ehrlichiosis in dogs. And at least according to my vet that we use, apparently there's not enough demand, although I did find a website and I tracked the disease, and it is spread across the U.S. It is more prevalent in the southern states, but there are cases diagnosed every month across the U.S. and in most of the counties in the U.S. And so it is a disease that you need to watch out for. The best thing to do is to find a good preventative medication and definitely read the little product insert and maybe even go on to the company's website and see what information you can find there to make sure that, when you're giving the product, that it is covering the dog from the flea and ticks that are in your area for the required amount of time. or you may need to give the product more often. So we have moved to giving the product now every 2 months to all of our dogs, and so I think as long as we don't miss a dog, or we aren't late with a dosage of it, I think our dogs will probably be fine moving forward. Um, oh, all the ticks that are in our area, the dog tick, the Lone Star tick, the black-legged tick, all of them carry Ehrlichiosis or Lichia, and can transmit that to your dogs. And so it's important that you have some sort of flea and tick preventative on your dogs year round. Okay. Some signs of your dog having ehrlichiosis, there is like kind of some short-term stuff and then some long-term symptoms. It seems like all of our dogs have never fully recovered from it in the short term, and so they continue to have it and continue to be carriers of the disease. But some real common things that come up: initial infection, they're going to have a fever, some swelling of the lymph nodes, decreased amount of platelets in their bloodstream, and along with an enlarged spleen. And so most of those things, then the fever, you'd have to take the dog in and have them diagnosed. Long-term stuff, and some of these can kind of carry on from the short term moving into long term, but you'll see definitely a loss of appetite. The dogs will be depressed. They won't have as much stamina. They might be a little stiff, and when they're getting up and walking. There'll be some swelling in the limbs, and there might even be some coughing or some difficulty in breathing. A lot of the short-term cases, kind of happen in the warmer months, and then the dogs kind of get over them. But with being here in Texas, we've got warm weather all year round, and so there really isn't, a season where the ticks completely die off. They're here pretty much year round across the state, and so the dogs can get the disease at any point, throughout the year. And so, again, it's really important to try to prevent the disease, because once the dogs have it, they have it for life. And even if it goes into remission, it will kind of hang out and hide in their bone marrow. And then anytime that the dog's body system is challenged, whether it's a lack of feed or they get slightly ill for some reason, that ehrlichiosis will flare up again, and you'll have to go through the whole process of treatment. And so what is the process of treatment? Well, if you catch it quick enough, you can get antibiotics into the dog. Most likely your vet is going to recommend 20 or 25 days of doxycycline. It may be once a day, it may be twice a day, kind of depends on the severity of the case, but that's been our experience. And that's also what was recommended in the Merck manual as well. But these things can lead to other like secondary issues, and that was the issue that happened with the guard dog Johnny that we most recently lost. Every time this disease flares up, it affects one or more of their body systems, and so over time, it really wears the dogs down, and your working life of the dogs is decreased. For us, what we've seen is up to 3 years. So if you're hoping to get 10 years of working life out of a guard dog, if they get ehrlichiosis, you're probably going to be looking at maybe 7 or 8, that they'll live to. Johnny's issue was he had ended up getting kind of rolled underneath a truck one time. He didn't actually get run over, but he had some issues kind of, moving around after that. We had him on medication, and he was kenneled. He got better. He was out working for another year and a half, maybe 2 years. And then the ehrlichiosis had attacked the cartilage in his spine. And so due to the injury, the cartilage and the bone was a little bit weaker in that specific area. And so he ended up getting paralyzed in his hips, and there was no choice but for us to just put him down. And so, again, with ehrlichiosis, prevention is the key to this disease, and making sure, that the dogs don't get it. And if they do, get the dog into the vet right away. If you see them kind of depressed and skinny, they'll look really anorexic. And, they'll start to lose muscle mass as the disease progresses on long term if it's not treated. And so, likely what you're going to have to do is probably kennel the dog at some point for several weeks, maybe even several months, to rebuild that muscle condition and overall body condition from this disease. So, if folks have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. We could talk about ehrlichiosis for an hour or more here, but I do have some other questions to get to. So, next up, Sarah, I hope you're one of our, top followers at this point, and you've gotten one of those little Facebook badges. I appreciate you sending in questions all the time. So Sarah Smith's question, she says she knows that we don't do stuff with poultry. I'm hoping at some point we do, Sarah, but at least for now, we're strictly sheep and goats. And she's assuming that the issue that we're gonna go into here in a minute is just some normal teenage behavior, and she treated it like any aggressive stock scenario. And so she had a chicken that was hurt a week ago. Some of the feathers were all over in the dog's pen, and so she's assuming it's one of her dogs. She's got two girls. After she found the chicken, who luckily will make it, so that's good to hear, because most of the time, the dogs break their toys pretty easily with the chickens. She noticed that Pi was kind of taking an unhealthy interest in the birds and has started doing some chasing. The verbal correction that's worked in the past didn't work, and so she put a shock collar on her. And so now every time she started kind of eyeing the chickens too intently, she's kind of crouched down sometimes. And yesterday she actively started chasing her. So Sarah zapped her. She's only had to do this about 3 times, and she thinks, that Pi is kind of getting the message finally. Doesn't seem like teenage or boredom behavior to me. And she also says that they're patrolling a smaller area right now because there's not enough grass to open up her whole property to the goats. She says that Pi will be a year old in mid-January. Luna hasn't shown any interest in the birds, and so she's fairly sure it wasn't her. And that Pi also had some interest in the birds when she was younger, but because they're kind of flapping around and they're good squeaky toys for the dogs, at that point, a firm no had kind of taken care of the issue. So I would agree with you, Sarah, that it is most likely teenage behavior. Pi is just a year, so she's still right in the middle of those teenage months, which for new producers, generally lasts from about 8 months to about 18 months, and there's kind of that range there. And sometimes, it starts a little younger, and, sometimes it goes a little bit longer to 20, maybe even 24 months with some of the dogs. So, that's what I would say it most likely is. It could be boredom as well, if they don't have enough, things to do. And so one thing on that, I'd encourage you to go down to like a local butcher shop. You generally can't find these in the grocery store anymore, so you probably have to go to a regular butcher and get some cow leg bones or knuckle bones, and give those to the dogs to chew on. And especially for Pi, since she's still a teenage dog, she's going to need something to kind of take out some of that energy and frustration. And those bones work really well. They won't splinter on you. And there's no chance of her swallowing a whole knuckle bone or a big chunk of a leg bone that way as well. I do that for our dogs from time to time. When I say our dogs, my personal guard dogs. If it seems like they're in too small of an area, because we're rotating some pastures or whatever, we'll give them a bone to kind of take off some of that boredom and give them something to do so that they don't start doing bad puppy stuff. So hopefully that helps you out with Pi, and feel free to keep me updated, Sarah, how she's coming along. Our next question is from Randallin Halverson. They have a 8-month-old Anatolian. He was born and raised with livestock and currently lives with some goats. A bunch of males, which is good. When the dog sees them coming, he gets really excited and happy. He just wants some attention while we're there tending to the animals. Recently, the dog has started to use his kind of front teeth to gently nibble on him. And I agree. I can't remember what the specific word is, Randallin, for that, but it is a very kind of, dog greeting behavior. And it's, generally from them, it's an affectionate way to greet us. And oh, the nibbling is just kind of been, on their pants or on a coat, he says. And it's only when they first come into the pen in the morning. But he's concerned that, they just saw the dog do it to a goat as well. And so he wanted to know if, they're seeking the goat's affection, should they stop it? And even when the dog does it to people. They wanted to know, does this type of behavior escalate? The teeth in the muzzle thing usually stops after 5 minutes or so of greeting. And, he says, I guess I just feel like his mouth shouldn't go on anyone, even if it's for affection. And so, I would tend to agree with you. I think it is a greeting behavior. Whether you want it to stop, with people or not, is kind of up to you. But, me personally, yes, I would recommend stopping that behavior. Because at some point, likely, they're going to be nibbling and they're going to nibble a little bit too hard. And, it may be in the summertime when you don't have a long coat on, or you even have just a short shirt or thin shirt. And, he's going to probably draw blood on you at some point, or somebody else. And, that's just definitely not acceptable with the dog. So I would stop the behavior all the way around with the dog. What would I do? I would start out with just a good firm scolding, and probably swat him on the rear and tell him no. And the next time he comes over, and he doesn't do that, reward that behavior. Positive rewards always work better than negative stuff, but sometimes you have to use negative punishment with the dogs, and that's just kind of the way things are. So it's likely, this behavior is going to lead to other things, especially with the animals. The nibbling like that is going to lead to like some biting and then some chewing. And, those goats, even though he's in with males and that are probably going to be a little bit more aggressive, they may have some ears chewed off, or some of their tails might be chewed off. And that's likely going to also lead to chasing, which is going to lead to other, probably wounds on the animal, especially like on their rear legs, or maybe up by their front legs, up by the front shoulder, where the dog is trying to grab them and hold them. And then, their skin is going to tear. And so you're going to see some infections and things like that start with your animals. So I would definitely stop the dog. Like I mentioned earlier with a different question, your pup is just starting, the teenage months. This is when we kind of see, about 8 months of age, we see a lot of these adolescent issues start with these dogs. And it's not that they won't be a great guard dog at some point, but you have to give extra management during this time and really keep an eye on these bad behaviors as they appear. You really need to assume that, the first time that you see one of these bad behaviors, it's most likely already been happening a whole bunch. And so, you've got to kind of stop what you're doing and deal with those issues and make sure that you're finding a solution to them fairly quickly before they do get out of hand, because they definitely will if you don't stop them soon. I think that's all the questions that we had so far. Let me see what we've got over here in the chat. Sarah says she believes the caller has gotten the message across to Pi. She's been avoiding the birds the last few days. We'll just continue to keep an eye on it. Well, that's good to hear. One thing I do have to tell folks is a lot of times people are like, oh my God, you use a shock collar, you put a drag on a dog, you put a yoke on a dog. Well, we can't be out training these dogs 24 hours a day. And some folks like to say, well, then they shouldn't be out with the livestock. Not everybody has that luxury to keep their dog penned up. They need them out guarding animals to keep predators away. And so, yes, in an ideal world, everybody would have a small pen and have all day long to spend with their guard dogs, training them, making sure that they're not being little demons during their teenage months. But that's not always possible, just like it's not possible for you to do the same thing if you have a teenage child. You can't be with them 24 hours a day. And so, while I don't like to go to a shock collar as a first training aid, sometimes you have to in the situation like with Pi. You can't have a dog, injuring animals. And you can't always be with them 24 hours a day, and you need them to be guarding animals sometimes. So we've got a couple other questions that just came up here. Oscar says he has a yoke on his dog, but he's figured out to jump over the fence, and he's only 8 months old. How or what can I do to keep him in with the herd? Well, let me scroll back up because we're getting some other questions here. Um, Oscar, I think the easiest thing, that I would say is, leave the yoke on him so that he's not digging underneath, but add a strand of hot wire at the top of the fence. They make some metal, and I get this question every once in a while, and I never can remember who makes these things, but there is a company that's out there that makes a metal arm that's got like a little loop in the middle of it that has some plastic or rubber insulation around it. And it's an extended insulator, and it's probably, they come in some different sizes, but I think they come in like 12 and 18-inch sizes. And you can mount that at the top of your fence post, and so that it hangs over into the area where the dog is, and it will keep them from jumping over. That's a lot better than using one of those little short 3 or 4 inch plastic insulators, and definitely much better than the caps that you can put on the top of the fence, because the dog will not even come into contact with those a lot of times. You can definitely go online and find those metal extended insulators. It's made out of a piece of like galvanized round stock, and that would be my first recommendation to you, Oscar. If you want to go towards something else, you could go to like an invisible fence collar. That would work as well. But even the cheapest ones that are out there are still about $400 or $500 for one of those. And if you have a really small place, sometimes depending on how many acres you have, like an invisible fence collar won't work for you. So those are a couple of recommendations, and hopefully those help out for you, Oscar. Craig Jensen's got a question. Can I discuss using siblings, the good and the bad? Well, Craig, the biggest problem with the sibling dogs, or even dogs from the same from different litters that are the same age, is that they're going to go through adolescence at the same time. And while they have backup because there's a second dog there, they also will feed off of each other's bad behavior. And that's the biggest issue, going through adolescence when you have two siblings and they're together, or even, dogs of the exact same age. And so that's generally the problem. I don't see any issue with having sibling dogs. I mean, heck, a lot of our dogs that we have are siblings, and they've gone through the bonding program, at the same time. But like I said, really the issue with sibling dogs is when they're going through adolescence. If you can keep them separated, put them in two separate pastures on the ranch, away from each other where they can't see each other, or run up and down the fence and be bad dogs together. That's something I would definitely recommend. Other than that, I think they work well together. And sometimes, if you need dogs that are more apt to challenge a threat, if you've got a close-in dog that's maybe a Maremma or a Croc-Chan, and you need dogs to be more floaters or out on the perimeter, I would say get two dogs and bond them together, but keep them separated during adolescence and then put them back together. Next question is from Jody. Thanks for logging on, Jody. Let's see. She can't walk her dog around 1,000 acres. The Shock GPS doesn't work, runs right through it. Well, yes. I don't generally suggest you walk your dogs around like your ranch perimeters. We do the walking like around our bonding pens. And so our bonding pens are roughly about an acre in size. And so I think you're probably referring to that post that I had the other day. We use it in a couple ways. One, to kind of, do some leash training with the dogs. Two, to check for holes that may be getting dug when we're not there. And just kind of help teach the dog some respect, as they're walking along, and if they brush up against that hot wire that we run in our bonding pens. I guess on the the shock collar, um, had my question for you, and so hopefully you're still logged on here and you can give me some follow up. But um, did you go through the actual training process that the company recommends? Have found the invisible fence collars, whether it's Spot On or the Invisible Fence brand, to work very well for our dogs. And we did some of that training, or we do that training each time. We're going to put a dog in an invisible fence pasture, and we haven't had dogs run through those very often. Some dogs, yes, but not very often. I mean, we've used the invisible fence collars to retrain dogs that were roaming 4 and 5 miles from the ranch, and it's worked very well for those. Another issue that happens a lot of times with folks is, if you've got a longer haired dog, Jody, like a Pyrenees, are you clipping a little bit of that hair, fairly short on their neck where those electrodes are supposed to be? Also, I found a recent post from somebody. I'm not sure why they were doing this because the companies don't recommend this, but a person was telling folks to put the invisible fence collar, the shocking portion, on the side of the neck or on the back of the dog's neck. Well, the skin in those areas is not as tender and not as likely to fully shock the dog like the collars are designed to. There's a reason that they tell you to put it right down on the throat, because that area is very sensitive to the dog, and they will get the full stimulation of that shock when it occurs. The other thing too, do you have it set all the way on high, and have you used it all the way on high, during the training time? Okay, so Jody says she has shaved their neck. Okay, that's good. And it's only one dog. All other 5 don't leave. Well, okay, we're making some progress there. Then at least the other 5 aren't leaving. How old is this dog, Jody, that you're having the issues with? And I'm kind of waiting for that answer. Let me see. I got a couple other questions that kind of popped up here. Okay, so Jody says it's set on high, and she sees that it's actually shocking him, but he still doesn't care. Okay, and he's 4 years old. Oh, wow, I was hoping maybe he was kind of an adolescent for you. Um, Boy, that's a tough one, Jody. I guess I would go back to maybe doing some retraining with this dog. Get him into a bonding pen, or a trap or a water lot, something like that you've got, that has some really good fencing. And I would definitely have hot wire at the base, and I would have some hot wire at the top of the fence. And I would leave him in there for several months, until he's kind of figured out that he can't get out of that pasture anymore, or that lot or trap. I think he needs a good length of time in a pasture that he can't get out of. The other thing I would probably do besides the hot wire is I would leave that invisible fence collar on him as well, and I would set it up where that boundary is just inside the actual perimeter fence of that pasture, and kind of go from there and see what happens. I would be curious, if you can get that done, and then reach back out to me and let me know how he does with that, because at 4 years old he should have learned, especially since the other dogs aren't leaving. He should have kind of figured this out by this point. And do I mean, is he chasing a threat, each time, is it kind of happening in the same area of your pasture? I'm just kind of curious to know. There could be something in that particular area that's drawing that specific dog off the property. And you're very welcome for that help. Okay, so he's a rescue, so maybe he may not have had some better training as a younger dog. But I would definitely do the hot wire at the base, hot wire at the top of the fence, and keep that invisible fence collar on him, and leave them in a pasture for a month or two. When we've done retraining with the invisible fence collars, we leave the dogs in those for 3 months straight. Um, okay, and so this dog is chasing. It's not in the same area, she says, and he even go under fences inside rivers. Oh, geez. Okay, so he's being a real big pain in the butt for you. Um, yeah, I'd get him into a smaller area where he's separated from the other dogs, and make sure you got a good hot fence charger. The key, to electric fences is, making sure you've got a really good ground. What we do, and since I've started doing this even personally, I always maintain a good hot fence now. I would use three 8-foot ground rods, and I would drive them in 10 feet apart, drive them down into the ground until there's about 6 inches above it, and then run your ground wire to all three of them. And I don't think you'll have any issues by not having a good hot fence. Um, you know, Even if you're only fencing in an acre, buy something with the largest amount of joules that you can afford. I have found that it's never not needed. Okay, so don't buy like a $25 fence charger, from Tractor Supply. Go and get a good name brand one from like Gallagher or Parmac, something that would do like 100 miles of fence. That's the kind of fence charger you need for this type of dog. So it's always going to be good and hot, and so he learns to respect some fence boundaries. So, okay, we had some other questions. Let me get back up to those. Um, okay, so back to Craig Jensen's question. Do you determine the number of dogs to be used based on herd size or on acreage size? Um, well, Craig, we generally determine the number of dogs based on herd size. Um, you know, Kind of the running standard is 1 to 2 dogs per 100 head, and then go from there. If you've got 2 dogs per 100 head, for instance, and you're still having predation, then I would add a third dog. Um, you know, some areas, here in Texas, we run with that number. Other areas where, I've got producers who are seeing coyotes, especially running in packs, and it's not a female training pups. These are all adult coyotes. Um, in those kind of areas where you've got really high predation, or if you're, in areas where you've got large predators like wolves, bears, lots of lions, I would probably drop that number down to 1 to 2 dogs per 50 head. Um, and kind of go from there. Again, you don't want to go out and just buy a whole bunch of dogs because you can have too many dogs. And so while it's hard to see predation going on, it's better to add, one dog at a time until you reach that point where you're not having predation anymore, and then just maintain that number. And if you get more stock, then add another dog. But that's basically how we determine it. How many acres, you can look at that as well, and that kind of does come into the determination when we're looking at how many dogs to add. But really, it's more of, what quality of fence do you have? Do you have a lot of brush? Is it relatively flat land, or is it got a lot of hills? Are there places like canyons and overhangs, and creek beds and things like that for predators to hide? If you've got a lot of that stuff, then you need to have more dogs than just somebody that has a wide open pasture and, brand new fencing. So, one issue that I see a lot is folks that have smaller properties think that they need to have 2 or 3 dogs on like 10 acres. You don't need to have that many dogs, on that smaller property, unless you just have basically no fence and it's just solid brush. Most folks that have small property like that have fairly open property and have fairly good fencing. And so one dog can definitely handle that type of predator threat. Again, unless you have large predators like wolves or bears that are regularly coming onto your property and, killing your livestock. So I think we had one more follow-up question from somebody. Okay, this one's from Oscar again. He says, when we let our herd out to graze the pastures, is it normal for our dog to wander off and leave the herd? Well, I guess it depends on how far they're wandering off, Oscar. And so if you're still on, maybe you can let me know that, and maybe how big the pastures are. But if you're penning the dogs and livestock up at night, for instance, I would say no. It probably isn't unusual for the dog to wander off. They're going to want to go out and scent mark whatever their territory is, and to monitor that area for predators and check to see if there's any predators that have crossed their boundary, their scent marked area. So, I mean, if they wander off and they don't come back until, whenever you're bringing all the animals in again, then yes, that's probably not normal, and that would be an issue. But, if they go out, wander off for an hour or two, and then, they come back and they're with the herd the rest of the time, likely the dogs are just going out and checking their perimeter and scent marking that area and then coming back. Well, does anybody else have any other questions or any more follow-up kind of stuff? Oh, good, Jody. You got the big chargers, the multiple hundreds of miles. Yes, that's exactly what you need for this dog. I would set one of those up with two or three, 8-foot ground rods spaced 10 feet apart. Some good thick wire. The galvanized steel stuff, because that aluminum stuff just doesn't last. Neither does that poly wire. Um, since I started doing that stuff, I don't have any issues with our hot wire system at work or at home personally. Um, and I've got several guard dogs at home on a small property, and they don't wander. They have respect for our fence. Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I sure do appreciate everybody logging on today. And Sarah, again, thanks for helping out with the sound issue. I'm going to make some notes, and hopefully this speaker that I'm using this time actually works the next time, when we do one of these Q&As. Um, oh, I got a follow up here with Oscar. He says, we have three dogs. One of the females stays behind with the herd, but the other two will wander off and play around. Uh, they sit on 180 acres. They use about 20 acres for the herd to go out and graze, and the two males and female waters. They have a total of three dogs. So, you know, I guess Oscar, I would say that it's good that at least one dog is always staying with the herd. They've worked out their own kind of guarding style, and sometimes during the dog's life that may change. A different dog may end up staying with the herd, and the other two go off. Um, but I would still think what you might want to do is get a GPS tracker for each of those dogs and really kind of see where they're going. This would be a classic use. I don't know if you're close to us. But we do kind of lend out GPS trackers for a month or so, sometimes up to 6 weeks at a time. If you're, close to the center, I could get you a couple of those. If not, I would encourage you to get some GPS trackers on the dogs and kind of see where those two are that are wandering off from time to time. I still would think, even though it might look like they're playing around. I'd be willing to bet that they're going out and scent marking their territory and kind of letting predators know that hey, this is their area, and not the predators. So I appreciate that follow up information. If you've got any questions about GPS trackers, feel free to reach out to me either here on a Q&A or give me a call at the center or shoot me an email. I'm happy to talk to you. Just real quick, for those folks that are new to us or haven't heard about our trackers and stuff, the ones that we use are called an Oyster 3. You can get those from Lone Star Tracking. Those are the ones that we've found that work out the best for guard dogs. We get good battery life out of them. They hold up really well as far as the dogs going into ponds or creeks or water troughs or whatever and getting them wet. And they've got a good, fairly thick case on them. I think in 6 years now, I think we've only lost one tracker to a case being broken. And I'm not sure quite how the dogs did that, but somehow they cracked one of them and shorted out the tracker. But I guess that's all we've got for today. And we'll do another Q&A session. The next one will be, we're going back to Thursdays this semester. It's going to work out a little bit better with me with my master's courses. So our next Q&A will be on Thursday, February 6th. Still doing these at 2 p.m. Hopefully we have the sound figured out finally for that one. I do want to thank our sponsor again, Spot On Fence. If you're looking for an invisible fence system, I'd encourage you to go check out Spot On Fence's system. It does have a built-in GPS tracker, and it also has an e-collar feature that they can turn on if you contact them for that. Also want to thank the Sheep and Goat Predator Management Board for their continued funding of the program. That's going to be it for today, folks. Sure appreciate everybody logging on. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me here at the AgriLife Center. Thank you very much for watching today.